So, Kirti, are you excited about this potential retreat that we're going to host at Pafuri?
Really excited. I think there's so much value actually in doing this and to center, our health in terms of the resources we have. So really excited to be doing this at Pafuri. I'm
Yeah.
like, what life
And
choices did I make that were right for me to be able to do this?
I was actually reflecting earlier on that you and I had met many, many years ago, just up the road from where Return Africa's offices is. There was an
Yeah,
art exhibition, and I think we had done some drawing thing, and you and I connected without knowing that we would reconnect years later and
exactly.
do this
Exactly.
workshop. So it's interesting to see your growth. I see people are joining, so we're just going to give them a few more minutes. I would say about 2 or 3 minutes. In the meanwhile, as Kirti has mentioned, please feel free to put up a little intro of yourself in the chat box so we can learn a little bit about who you are and where you're located. However many words you feel like or not. I'm not sure if the unmute button has been activated, but if you are able to unmute yourself, you're also welcome to do that before we start.
Alexis, I see you've unmuted yourself. Oh, please go ahead.
So we've got Margaret Ann, who says her business is We Do Nature. She's based in Cape Town and would love to add a retreat option to her client offering. That's great. Thank you, Margaret Ann. And we know you well, and we know how much you love Pafuri. I think there may be a challenge with using the mics, so let's go ahead with the chat box, and feel free to ask us any questions. We'll give it a minute more, and then we'll start commencing at 11:03.
Perfect.
Alexis is also a name that we recognize, someone who has also traveled to Pafuri. Anyone else who's traveled to Pafuri in our audience, perhaps you can just put a thumbs up or wave your hand or something.
It is a remarkable spot of South Africa, actually.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I can't see a first name, but I see Miss M. Van Dijk and Kim. So we've got some Pafuri fans here. Great. Okay, I think we're going to get this webinar going simply for the purpose of keeping our time. Um, Sorry, I just see a message here from Thea, based in Johannesburg in the corporate sector, love Pafuri, and she's been there in January this year again.
Really?
What a wonderful time to travel to Pafuri because it is the rainy season and the bush is just spectacular and different to the dry season. So, Kirti, as mentioned, let's get going. Whoever else joins can just pick up as we go along. And okay, so I just wanted to formally introduce Dr. Kirti Ranchod. She is somebody that, as I mentioned earlier, I met many years ago without knowing that later on our interests would coincide with me having a joint Return Africa and Kirti wanting to follow her dreams. So Kirti is a neurologist by training. She spent quite a chunk of her career in the medical field. And when I had met her years ago, she mentioned something very strange to me at the time because I really could not understand or conceptualize what it was about. She said that she wants to go out into businesses, as she had just launched Memorability, which is her business, and talk about brain health. And so I thought another one of those wellness ladies who's talking about yoga and mental health and all of that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't like something that I fully understood. And I've watched as the years went on how her business has grown and how her narrative has evolved. And she's now allowing herself to go into corporates and into big businesses to talk about brain health. And it is a conversation that we have not had in previous years. It's not been something that we spoke about because we actually lack the understanding. And I recognize that as myself, from myself being a case study in that. But over the years, I've learned a little bit about what she does and who she is and how she can impact individuals in a different way, not just talking about the mental health, wellness, etc. Although that's really super important in our day and age. So Kirti would like to tie in nature and the concept of neuroscience and wellness. And she had talked to us actually prior to me joining Return Africa. She had already spoken to us about it, but we reconnected and we decided that it was now the best time for us to put together a package that we could offer to our very distinguished audience, which is you guys, and to be able to offer this either through you guys to your clients or for yourselves if it's something that would be of interest. So this webinar is the first of its kind for Return Africa, where we bring in a medical professional and talk about a particular retreat. But it also is an opportunity for you guys specifically to learn about brain health and also to be encouraged to join our retreat, which I will talk about at the end. So Kirti is a fellow at quite a few universities and organizations. She's traveled the world speaking about brain health. She attends many webinars globally, and she's also part of a network of neurologists and neuroscientists. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Ranchod, Kirti, who will present to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirvani. I really am excited to be hosting this with Return Africa and looking forward to the retreat as we go forward. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, just making sure you can see, Nirvani.
Yes, we can see the screen. Thank you.
Perfect. Just as a start, all the images that are natural and beautiful are from Pafuri. As an introduction, what do I do and why is this important? As Nirvani mentioned, I'm a neurologist, a clinical medical doctor, had an exceptionally busy practice, but there was an intersection of several factors, two of which I will actually mention. The one was that my grandmother, who I absolutely adored, her home really was my childhood Disney World, developed Alzheimer's disease. And initially, there really is a sense of helplessness. Subsequently, in terms of a response, it was like, what could I actually do? How do I look at this different? How can I support my grandmother, but also other people living with the illness? And this led me to a path where I ended up at UCSF Memory Center in San Francisco and started exploring brain health and dementia prevention strategies. So not only dementia is part of a whole, and in terms of how we look at the brain and what we need to do to protect the brain. But the second aspect was in my private practice, at least 60% of the people I saw had potentially preventable illness or illness where we could actually reduce risk going forward, like Alzheimer's disease, migraine, stroke, etc. I was one of those doctors that was giving lots of advice, explaining what needed to change. But for the most part, people couldn't adopt the advice I was giving because it's impractical to only know the science. It's impractical to only have the understanding that you need to eat better. So this actually developed, Memorability developed as a response to making the neuroscience really practical. What does that actually mean so that it translates into health? Part of the approach is recognizing that we have resources beyond medication. Medication works, it is effective. I want to make that quite clear. I'm not anti-science, anti-medicine, anti-anything. But I also understand that we have resources beyond medication that can support health, particularly in the health promotion and prevention phase of the way we look at health. And that's where nature comes in, along with art, music, etc. So I'm going to give an introduction into brain skills, training, and brain health. Then we're actually going to have a practical activity before I go into the retreat and what we will be doing. So brain health looks at keeping the brain healthy in different ways. One of the ways is looking at illness such as depression, dementia, stroke, and what we can do to reduce risk or support people living with these illnesses so that they can live healthy, fulfilling lives. The second aspect looks at the science behind it. So gray matter, white matter, connections in the brain, and how do we support those underlying physiological or anatomical parts of the brain to actually function at its best. The third aspect is where I actually focus, but all three are linked. And it's how do we train the brain? What if we started looking at brain skills, understanding that these are skills we need really to live well, to enjoy our lives, to have healthy relationships? And how do we then support training the brain in a systematic, structured way, supported by science, but again, also understanding what we have within our cultures, our communities, our traditions to actually support health? So the way I work is that we train the brain with experiences or activities, because particularly as adults, but definitively as children as well, we learn from experience, not from me just telling you what is good for you. Experience attached to understanding your motivation and impact on you. And I'll give an example, like I say, in terms of that. Ultimately leading to better brain function and supporting overall well-being. I love the analogy of playing the piano. Now, in terms of training the brain, anything we do shapes the brain. When I learn to play the piano, the parts of the brain that are important in playing the piano, such as fine motor coordination, finger coordination, are more developed than in people who don't play the piano. Makes perfect sense, right? And understanding this, then we can train the brain and become more efficient at a brain skill like calm, or perhaps memory or focus. So depending on what we want or what we feel we need to improve, we can adopt certain practices that have been shown to actually support that brain function. And in a sense, you then develop the neural circuitry for that, and your brain becomes efficient at switching to that state. Even a genius pianist, however, needs to practice. So to develop that circuitry needs practice. When we learn to play the piano, we need the correct tools, the resources. We need a piano. We need the correct teachers for us. You can have, a whole range of teachers, but in part it is going to depend on the relationship, how you relate to the teaching method, etc. And then you need practice and discipline. So when we look at it from a brain health point of view and a brain skills point of view, it becomes about how do I now look at the tools that I need to support training the brain? How can I learn to use these tools effectively? How can I support the effectiveness of these tools, so the ecosystem? And where am I going to find the internal motivation to do this regularly with practice and discipline so that I develop the neural circuitry for calm? I am going to stop here quickly just to take any questions or comments or thoughts, if there are any, before I continue. I think you said there was a problem with the mic, but if anybody wants to share a question in the chat box, as Nirvani did say.
I can't see any questions here for now, so I think carry on, Kirti.
Okay, perfect. What we're going to do is we're going to practice one of the guided experiences that I have. So the way I work is, like I say, looking at the specific tools to train the brain. This is supported by a specific process that includes encouraging a sense of self-awareness, so understanding the impact on you, and then supported by neuroscience. So this one is about shifting mood, and we're going to use a set of images. I'm going to show you a series of 5 images. For each image, I just want you to look at the image and I want you to write down what it makes you feel and what do you end up thinking about. We're going to spend 30 seconds on each image. Let's make it 20 seconds on each image. I am
Kirti,
just
you
sorting out
can perhaps ask everybody to put it in the chat box or write it down personally. Which would you prefer?
I think I'm going to leave it up to them. So put it in the chat box. I think that would be lovely for our discussion as well. So add to the chat box. Nirvani and Tim, I would also encourage you to add it to the chat box. And so we're going to do 20 seconds for each image. What do you feel? Let me make it 30 seconds since we're going to write. And what does it make you think about? Okay. We're going to start with the first image. What does it make you feel? And what are you thinking about when you see the image? I will only address the responses at the end after we've looked at all 5 images. Next image. How do you feel? And what are you thinking about? Next image. I'm actually going to increase the timer, but I think 30 seconds is too short. So yeah, just a little more time for each image. Next image. The last image. Perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to go.
Sorry, Kirti, are you able to see the chat box and everybody's responses so far?
I am. But what I'm going to do is maybe ask you to help me to go through that, because I'm going to go back to the first image and maybe we can look at what people said from the first image to all of it. If people are able to unmute, that's also perfect, but I think we got, right? Give me a second. I just want to go back to the first image and okay, so the first image of Joburg, which is kind of a pretty picture of Joburg, actually. But yes, what were the comments?
So we had fast, multicultural, and cosmopolitan. Yeah, those were the 3 responses in the chat box for that image.
And were there any feelings attached to it, or what did you feel when you saw it?
So Margaret Ann said that she doesn't want to be there, obviously because it's fast paced, etc. So I just think I love Joburg myself personally. So I thought this image represents the kind of New York of Africa to me. So I quite loved it. And of course, we have the most beautiful sunsets in Johannesburg. No bias here, apart from Pafuri, mind you. But yeah, so for me, it was really about the multiculturalism.
Perfect. Second image.
So we've got dirty, we've got disgust, anxious. So I think it represents pollution and yeah, one comment said that it was pollution, in fact, and that it represents the industrial era.
Next one.
Yeah. So we've got stimulated, trying to reactivate long forgotten skills, and tired, no thank you, don't want to do maths, and solving problems, because I think that's what maths is intended to do. Yeah, so those are the 3 comments that we've got up there.
Perfect. So I'm going to go through all the images, but math ends up being quite polarizing. Like you get both responses in every single discussion I do.
Interesting. Yeah, okay, so we've got peace, nurture, peaceful, happy, nature is just so simple, care, beauty, simplicity, mutual care. Yeah, those are representing these images.
Perfect. So this is an image from Pafuri, as is this one.
Yeah, for this image, we've got tranquility, calm, free, and we have a response to the comment about the snares. The best thing to do is support the north of the Kruger Park, Pafuri, so that funds generated can be plowed back into anti-poaching or de-snaring. So that comment comes from our CEO, actually, who's in the background, and he suggests that we be part of the solution, which I love.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So isn't that fascinating? In a space of less than 5 minutes, I took you from Joburg to Pafuri. From fast, multicultural, cosmopolitan, slightly stressful, to tranquil, calm, happy, peaceful, using a set of images. Now, they were very carefully constructed, right? They were constructed because I understand the power of an image, how that shifts your brain function in a sense, and what you'll start noticing. Now, the image actually changes mood almost automatically. If I show you the image with pollution, and then I showed you the image of the elephants in Pafuri, mood is shifted almost automatically. With that, what you're thinking about is also shifted depending in part on associations. So, for example, we need to protect the elephants from snares, but also automatically by shifting from a stress state to a calm state, we're able to shift the way we view our problems, how we need to communicate. And even if you think about going into a challenging situation, we can then shift how we respond to that challenging situation, understanding this impact on us. I like the math one, like I explained, because depending on our experience, we either think, oh, wow, cool. You know, I've only had one person actually try to solve the equation, a fellow doctor, a good friend of mine, who actually tried to solve the equation. It was the first time somebody had tried to solve the equation there because she was so excited and couldn't because it's not actually, clear. But otherwise, math causes a lot of distress and it makes people feel insecure and not good enough. And do we really have to? Like there's this anxiety and stress. But again, this is understanding that we can use images as a tool, just like we use the piano to train the brain. We can use specific images to train the brain for the specific outcome if we want to support brain health and mental well-being. I'm going to now go back into the presentation and just explain some of what happens and why this becomes powerful. So for longer sessions, what we also do is we go into the brain function. How does this actually shift the way we act? Because what we feel shifts the way we think and then the way we behave or problem solve or focus. And so we do that within the actual program as well. Now, why does nature have such a profound impact, even just as an image? So there's lots of science looking at how nature potentially resets the brain in a sense, gives you that sense of awe, your sense within a bigger picture, and therefore removes that sense of having to control everything that we cannot possibly control, and therefore remove some of the stress element. But there's a lot to it that we do not understand. But some of the studies looking at the way nature supports brain function have been absolutely fascinating for me to read. So in one study, they had two groups of proofreaders. And the one group got to do a walk in a natural environment and then actually do the proofreading exercise. And the other group had nothing in particular, or I think nothing in particular. But what happened with the group in the natural environment is that they were better able to proofread, so less errors, etc. Now, when I think of proofreading, it requires a high degree of concentration, cognitive skill, but it's very tedious, right? And so to actually maintain that degree of concentration throughout this process is actually quite challenging. So spending time in a natural environment actually shifted brain performance, making them more efficient at proofreading. Isn't that incredible? There was also a study that looked at people who exercised in a park versus people who exercised in a gym. Now, exercise is healthy, whether you do it in a gym or in a park. And it has specific benefits, but there was also a difference. And they found that people who exercised in a natural environment actually had less of the negative ruminations, those negative thoughts about what you should do, how you could have done it better, why didn't you? That very self-critical voice in a sense, which we sometimes need, but it has also been shown that when this is excessive, it increases the risk of anxiety and depression. Now, this only shows us the potential of nature, right?
Sorry, I just wanted to interject there because Nina
yes,
has basically verified what you've just said. with her comment to say, I prefer a trail run to road running just because it feels better, better air, better views, and more relaxed.
Exactly, exactly. And so basically, for me, the science is supporting a lot of what we already understand, but understanding that there is the science behind it and showing this impact has been quite powerful for me to understand the value from a bigger scale. What do we know about filters in this? So what they've shown also, and maybe this is more relevant for us in Joburg, Nirvani, but what they've shown is that images of nature can also induce a similar response. And that's where it actually becomes quite powerful. Should I just stop sharing and I'll just take questions before I go into how we're going to tie this into the neuroscience and nature retreat? Any questions, thoughts, comments?
I don't see any in the chat box, and I wonder if Tim is able to activate the mic access. Tim, are you able to activate the mic access, or is that not possible?
Hi, Navani. Mic access is enabled, so
Okay.
Each individual should be able to activate their mic.
Okay. Great. I think let's try that. Maybe we'll get someone brave in the audience like Margaret Ann. Maybe you can unmute your mic, Margaret, and share a little bit of your thoughts so far. I think perhaps anyone else who's able to unmute their mic, feel free.
I'm going to pick on Tim. I'm going to pick on Tim to start. Tim, I'm going to ask you your opinion on the experience that you had.
Hello.
Putting me on the spot.
Oh, I see. Sorry,
I
Tim.
am.
I see Margaret Ann has unmuted successfully.
Perfect.
Yay.
No, let's give Tim the floor. Should we do ladies first?
Yeah, ladies first,
Ladies
please.
first.
Sorry, it took a while because I'm technically challenged and I couldn't find the bloody unmute button, but here we are. I absolutely agree with everything Kirti's saying in the terms of what we see is what we feel. 100%. And you could probably see from all my comments, I'm a farm girl and a nature girl. I don't want to be in a city and I don't want to do maths. I want to be out walking and my feet must be barefoot on the ground and I want to touch and feel and smell everything. My home, funny enough, is full of plants. And I think that's also wallpapers on my walls are of nature, plants. So everywhere around me is the sense of tranquility. So I totally agree with what you're saying, that those pictures of nature, the images, what we're seeing, be it a plant or a picture on my wall or the wallpaper, definitely brings calm.
Thank you, Margaret Ann.
Pleasure.
And over to you, Tim.
Yes, we're not letting you get away with this.
Visual aspects and the way you feel are so important. I'm a very visual person, so I understand the effect visuals have on your psyche. So yeah, I'm in total agreement that visuals play such an important role in your mental health.
Thanks, Tim. Anybody else?
Kim, yes.
Kim?
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm not able to access the chat for some reason, so I'm just sticking questions in the Q&A. Responses in the Q&A. I'm from Football's Foundation, so we're down at the coast, but I'm actually based in Joburg. And I've joined this call, and I certainly don't want to derail it in any sense. This is definitely like this is an ecotourism play on nature and neurology, right? But I think for our side, I joined because we're really interested in how do you use nature to, assist with some, I guess, like healing of community trauma. So our local communities, you know, are dealing with, I guess, various different trauma layers of poverty and, you know, substance abuse and all of that. And so less about actually how do we give the guests a good experience, but more how we can support our local communities and using the access to nature that we do have to do that in a scientific way.
Perfect. Perfect. So I think I'm going to answer that in two parts, but I'll first actually just go through how I pull this all together in terms of nature as a broad framework, which does tap into the retreat in part. And then I'm going to answer specifically with regard to that. I'm also happy to chat to you beyond this webinar to address very specific issues if you would like. Anybody else? And then I will just go into that because I think we're getting close to the end in terms of time.
I think you can carry on for now,
Yeah.
Kirti.
Okay, so how do I use nature? I've, you know, obviously the overall thing is about the well-being retreat, but it's how I use nature to actually support brain health. As I started, it was about understanding the correct tools that we need to train the brain, and then the correct process or method or teacher, other resources that actually support that training, practice and discipline, and then the ecosystem around it. The ecosystem would be the habits. So for example, sleep, food, exercise, etc. Now, in terms of the toolbox that I've designed to actually support brain health, I use music, I use art, I use mindfulness and nature. We understand that it can be quite difficult to actually train the brain. What you want to do is actually link these tools to something very specifically tangible, and then create and build on this so that you are able to use it effectively where you at. Because we're not always going to be able to stay in a natural environment, although Kim, it sounds like you are in a beautiful environment. So how do we use the experiences that we have and actually then support our daily practices for mindfulness, for using art and creativity, for using music or sound? And so in a natural environment, what we would do then is use the actual natural environment where we're sitting to construct a very specific mindfulness activity or activities, which we can then use when we go back home. Understanding also the context, what is going to be appropriate for me sitting in my car before I get out for any important meeting, or what do I use if I'm already in an office with other people around me? What are the images that I can use to actually support that very quick shift from stress to calm, depending on the environment that I'm in? What are the sounds that I can then structure around that? So basically, we use the natural world to support the development of these tools, but that we still have to practice. So in a sense, we take the natural environment of Pafuri home with us. The whole system is actually cohesive in terms of understanding inspiration, community engagement. What do we learn from each other? So the discussion becomes quite important because we all have our own experiences, and there's so much value in building that in terms of depth with an individual. But there's also the process of generating wisdom. You know, when all the stuff is happening with regard to AI and generative AI, I was like, this is our communities. This is what our conversations build on. A strong component of what I do that is included in all my work, including at the Wellbeing Retreat, is also looking at an aspect called cultural capital. What do we have within our traditions, our cultures, our communities that are forms of specific tools that support brain health? And we will be working with the local community to design this. In essence, we need to take what we learn in the natural environment back into the city, like Johannesburg, which I also enjoy despite it challenging us every single day. But understanding that how we do this, how those images are constructed, how we form the associations can be very specifically developed to support our brain health and largely for calm in terms of what I will be doing with regard to that. Coming back to the question, Kim, in terms of how does it support trauma? This is not constructed specifically for a specific response to trauma, but why I started including nature is that nature has this very profound impact on our mood and on our ability to problem solve, our ability to focus, pay attention, that it does by just being. So if it is possible to construct activities in nature that are linked to mindfulness activity, so you use the environment that you're in, but construct the very specific mindfulness activity linked to that natural environment, because it's hard actually to visualize. It's hard to actually switch from stress to calm. And that's why it's about building the association, building the neurocircuitry with a very specific structured process. Yes, which does require more detail and time to actually get into.
I think what we can do, Kirti, is connect you with Kim so you both can extend the conversation into more specifics. But Kim has touched on something that's really important in our ecotourism space, is the ability for us in the tourism sector to work alongside communities and coexist with communities that may have had historical impacts to their current way of living. So something that Kim mentioned was trauma, poverty, substance abuse in specific. And it is something that Africa, in our world, in the ecotourism space, we are impacted by. So it's also our responsibility to give back to those communities in various ways. As most of you know, Return Africa works very closely in partnership with the Makuleki community, who basically are the owners of the Makuleki Contractual Park. And our responsibility is also in terms of employment and to empower individuals from that space in order to exist in the world that we do, which is to create employment as well and to teach them skills that they would otherwise not have learned. But we recognize that some areas have more issues than others, and we are very mindful of that and sensitive to that. So I think it would be great, Kirti, if you could take up the conversation with Kim directly. We'll share your contact details with her.
Perfect. And maybe also to emphasize that point, to me, the natural environment that we have in South Africa and beyond, I'm focusing on South Africa because we're in South Africa, is a resource. And so I think everybody who came today understood that. And it's a resource for tourism, but it is a resource for health. And once we start understanding that and understanding how we engage with this resource that is accessible, some aspects becoming a bit harder to access for some of us, we can then start constructing programs to support people differently from only suggesting psychologists, psychiatrists, which are effective, do work, but we need bigger ecosystem to support health overall. And coming back again to community wisdom, it really is important for us as a framing going forward to understand the resources that we have across different cultures within a South African context. And I think this is, again, because my experience is Joburg, it may not be unique, but I'm going to say that it is. In Joburg, we all are really close to each other physically in terms of space, right? And so you invariably learn about other people, other cultures, other tradition, other music, and that value. And I think it really has shaped the work that I do in terms of this is a core resource. We need to invest in this resource. We need to invest in people and communities to support our health as a cohesive whole. So it really is important for us to look at this. And in part, it is what we will address as well, and what, like I said, address in my work. Maybe briefly also, I do a regular talk at the Origin Center, but it also touches on different aspects of this, so it can be a build for anybody who is in Johannesburg. Any other questions? We have time. I'm happy to stay on, but if there are any other questions. Oh, Nirvani, you wanted to present sorry, I hand over to Nirvani.
Yeah, I think let's just quickly talk about the retreat, Kirti.
Yes.
Maybe highlight what it is someone could expect to experience on this retreat. We've scheduled it over 4 days, 4 nights, 5 days. That would be hosted by yourself and in a group of individuals, I think around about 9 or 10 individuals on average. So maybe you could just highlight that.
So in essence, every day, what we will be doing is using the natural environment to actually build that resource for yourself in terms of nature, mindfulness, art, creativity, and sound or music. At the end of it, you leave with a toolkit that you are able to then use in the space that you are in, but that references the environment that you are in. But not just a toolkit in terms of general, there's the neuroscience would be explained, understanding your motivation, but also the group will end up generating something that will be unique to each group in terms of how the conversations develop, what the conversations lead to in terms of ideas as well. So in essence, there's the tools, there's the community and building the wisdom aspect of that. And there's a group experience, but a very personal understanding and impact that you take home to actually support you going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Kirti. We've got 2 tentative dates, which is the 30th of May and the 4th of July, for anyone who's interested in joining this retreat, or for someone who may be looking to send other individuals on. Please reach out to us. You will have access to the flyer, which is on our website. Tim, could you just remind us of the path of that flyer?
Sure. If you go onto our website, so returnafrica.com, you'll see in the top navigation, we've got experiences. Under experiences, you'll find Nature and Neuroscience Wellbeing Retreat, and this is where you can pick up that flyer.
Thank you so much. Yes, so essentially why this was so important to us was to be able to broaden awareness of nature, broaden awareness of the Northern Kruger Park, and to encourage more people to understand what Pafuri, which is so magical, really offers to our guests. It, from a sales perspective, and please indulge me for a minute, I always go out with the fact that there's no fences, there's no electricity lines, there's no noise pollution, there's no light pollution. It's pretty much off the grid. So Pafuri runs on solar. And when you go into an area like this in South Africa, which is so populated, it gives you a sense that, am I really in my country? Because it is so wild, it's so remote. And being that remote, it also allows us a chance to reset. And, we all need that. Once we go to Pafuri, many of you have been, but once you go to Pafuri and the day you leave, you realize how your vibrations suddenly start to slow down, and you're a little bit, there's a bit more clarity in your head, you're calmer. And essentially, that's why we thought Pafuri and brain health is so interlinked. And it's really a place that a lot of people need to experience. More and more people need to experience. So yes, thank you, Tim, for sharing that in the chat box. So Margaret, you say that is this something we hope to run a few times annually? Look, I think this is the first for us. We're really hoping to get more guests interested. So thank you, Margaret Ann, for that question. We will let you know how often we can run it. If there's more interest and we would rely on you to create that interest with your clients, then we would definitely offer it more regularly. For now, these 2 set departure dates are what we have in mind. And Kirti is also available for private conferences, or if you've got a group or a family or a larger party that you think this could be of value for, you can also reach out to us and Kirti, and we can make this happen on a private basis. And yes, it is hosted at Pafuri Camp. Although the idea of doing it at a walking camp is also quite a nice one, because the walking camps are completely off the grid and really different from a luxury experience that Pafuri Camp is. Not that it's not luxury, it's very comfortable. It's just a little bit rustic relative, and I'm talking about Nkula Camp specifically. Hutwini, which is our other walking camp, is a little bush camp, and I think our guests, we can actually look at hosting a more intimate group at that space as well in the future. Anything else you want to say about the retreat, Kirti?
No, I think, I'm open to questions. Whoever does want to reach out to me, feel free to share my details with them. Yeah.
Perhaps you can put your email address in the chat box. I think that would be great. For anyone who's interested in booking this retreat, you can reach out to Return Africa. Our email address is reservations@returnafrica.com. I'm also going to put that into the chat box. And yeah, any questions, please just unmute yourself, and comments as well. Feel free to share those. I would like to ask PJ if he's got any comments to share. PJ, I see you in the background there, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Hi, Navani. I was wondering
whether you as well.
Hi, Kitty. I was hoping to lurk in the background, but thank you very much. Let me just start by thanking both of you, Kirti and Navani, for putting this together. And I think, I've just looked at the flyer again, or the brochure. It's beautifully done. And I think, I have such a deep and passionate emotional connection to Pafuri, going back over 30 years. I believe it's one of those great healing places in the world. It's one that works both, I think, and you help us to understand this at the personal level, at the brain health level. It's a place of tranquility. But it's a place that has a dark history. It's a place that has come through, it has this deep human history, this more recent traumatic history. And Margaret Ann referred to the ongoing problems in that area with snaring and so on. So our involvement there is about healing, and it's about at the personal level, also at the level of earth healing, of conservation, but also in our partnership with the Makuleke people who lived there until 1969 and were then in an apartheid removed. So I've often said this is an opportunity to make amends, It's a difficult one because, life is complicated, but it really is, I think, an ideal setting for the type of work that you do, Kirti. So we're very happy, delighted that you've chosen to set it in this very special place. Thank you.
Thanks, PJ.
Great. If there's no other questions, we'll just hang around in case you want to chat privately to us. But thank you for your time. We really appreciate that you've made some time to join us, and that you've indulged us a little bit in our activities, etc. And we really look forward to welcoming you, your guests, your friends, your family at Pafuri. Whether on this retreat or not, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. It was lovely.